So after this all blows over and we leave quarantine, will there be anything left? We'll talk about that today on today's episode of the Geek Watch Podcast.
This is the Geek Watch Podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 106 of the Geek Watch Podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me on the phone, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hi, Brian.
Hey, and we also have another special guest calling in today, a fellow movie enthusiast and my partner on The Real Deal, Mr. Kevin Pauley.
How's it going?
Hey, Kevin, thanks for calling in, my man.
Glad to do so. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, yeah. Well, I figured we'd bring you in on to talk about a few things today because, of course, we both love movies, and things have been pretty much put on hold at this point because of the virus. And I've been seeing a lot of news of different things. So I was thinking that today might be a good time to talk about, once all this is over, what is there for us to look forward to? Now, of course, a lot of the movies are being postponed. They're saying now that Black Widow is not going to be coming out until November. I think that's what the last I heard.
I believe that is correct, yes.
Oh, yeah. I just saw that Onward, which was doing okay. And then, of course, it got hit. They've already put that up on Disney Plus. So,
yeah, and I thought that was a really great move by Disney. A lot of kids being stuck at home right now. That was a real smart move to get that up on their streaming service as soon as possible. It gives that film new life. And it's funny, since that's happened, I've seen more people talking about Onward on social media than I did before when it was in theaters.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, of course, there was talk about them, there was a thought that maybe you could do Black Widow on Disney Plus, but to be honest, I personally don't think that would have been a good idea. Mostly because I think that, especially now that we have so much stuff that's on hold. Certainly, television and movies are not being produced right now because they can't be. And so, of course, After all this stuff is over, you got to have something because we are.
Yeah. I see what you're saying, and I would have to agree. You've got to give people something to look forward to. So by pushing that back, that gives people, knowing especially that the Marvel Cinematic Universe is such a huge, a huge success and has such a gigantic following. That is something that would hopefully, and I got to wonder if that move is not only just for Disney, but also for the theater chains, because we know that many of them are hurting right now, especially AMC.
Yes.
Does this give them a chance, to sort of have a big hurrah once this passes, then it gives people something to look forward to get out to the theater, and it gives those theaters something to look forward to bring the crowds in when all this passes, because one thing I will say is I think people, when we're finally past that point, will be looking forward to getting out of their homes and going to do something. And going back to the movies, I think, will be something that, definitely would be a welcome addition, getting back into your regular routine. So postponing Black Widow makes a lot of sense to me versus putting it out on streaming, A, for that reason, but B, of course, also from the financial standpoint. These films are not cheap to produce, and yes, you have a lot of people paying in that subscription, but there's no way on earth that subscription, pays back what you've already spent on that film in marketing and, of course, in the film production itself. So, I get it.
Oh, yeah. And like you mentioned about AMC, I saw the article, which I'm sure you're referring to, where their S&P global rating went from a B+ to a CCC-, which basically means default is imminent. So there's a good possibility that AMC theaters will be shuttered and closed by the time this blows over, which is going to be amazing.
A lot of the theater houses are going to have to be very careful of that because AMC is a humongous chain, one of the biggest. And if they fall, then man, it just feels like everybody else is up in the air as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the thing about it is that's that's going to be a big blow to Hollywood as well, because that many theaters and not being able to put that's lost income for sure.
Oh, that's lost screenings, absolutely. That's how many screenings per weekend that you don't get now because of all the AMC theaters closed. Absolutely.
Yeah, and plus the fact that there's a real an up cost for if you see movies in IMAX, and AMC for the most part, they're the ones that are showing those IMAX movies. So that's a huge market to lose, because that's an upcharge, a major upcharge to see things in IMAX, and losing that number of IMAX screens is going to hurt for sure. Thing is, we've already drifted into a content desert at this point. Mandy and I, we do reviews for The Walking Dead on this program, and of course, the last Sunday was supposed to be the second to the last episode for this season, and this Sunday was supposed to be the season finale, but the virus hit before they could finish post-production, so they can't air it yet. So this weekend turned into basically the season finale. So it ended in a cliffhanger, and they're not sure when we're going to finally see that last episode. But we are now drifting into this content desert where things are ready to go. There'll be some television, there'll be some movies, but it's not going to just be, back to normal right off the bat for sure. And honestly, and it's going to be on both sides as well, because just because people say, they're saying, well, things have died down, it's safe to go back out, relatively speaking, but I think there's going to be a lot of cabin fever, and I think people are going to be bolting out to some degree, but I think there's still going to be some trepidation as well. I think there'll be people.
I think that's understandable. And the big question I have, is, like, for me, this has been really good because I'm able to catch up on things that I've not had a chance to watch.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not really dealing with the idea of a desert. I've got tons of content that I've not had a chance to even see yet. I just started watching Westworld and Watchmen on HBO.
Yeah.
It's been great to have something new to watch. In my mind, it's new because I didn't get a chance to see it before. So it's not necessarily that there's a desert of material. It's just a desert of new content.
Right.
I think I will say this, looking at Disney Plus as a big example. If they're smart, Disney owns the 20th Century Fox library, and right now, there's none of it on the streaming service. Well, it's going to be a while until you're going to be able to bring in new content, including all those Marvel shows. Wouldn't now be a good time to bring back some of these big classic films that they have control of from 20th Century Fox to bring that out for your streaming audience? I feel like that streaming model of theirs right now has been very much avoiding that, but I feel like they're going to have to really look hard at that, because there's only so much Disney content that they can put out. Yes, there's a lot, but again, it's only so much. But you've got an entire backlog of a studio's run that you're not doing anything with. Now would be a great time to get that stuff out there. So I'm hoping that we'll see some things like that. Content that's not been out there before or unavailable is now available to the masses because, hey, there's nothing else new being created. So why not bring out this stuff, which will be new to a lot of people?
Oh, yeah. And there's a lot of shots being fired right now as far as the streaming wars. I mean, I just saw HBO, they're putting out a lot of their old programs out for free at this point, where you don't need to have
very smart.
So, I mean, a lot of people at this point, like I said, there's a lot of content being put out at this point. Are you catching up on anything, Mandy? What are you watching at this point?
Well, you know what? I had never seen Community when it came out, so I'm catching up on it and, seeing that, and it's that kind of humor that I like, that kind of Office. What I see happening sort of in the future, after everything is over, like you said, we're still going to have, people are ready to get out of the house, but people are still going to have this kind of almost Howard Hughes fear of gathering around crowds.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I agree with you there.
I foresee what could happen would be a revival of the drive-in theater. And so you have to update things, but rather than having these speakers on the wall on the doors, you'll download an app on your phone that will give you the audio to the movie that you're watching, and then you watch it from your cars. That way you're in this social situation, but you're not exposed necessarily.
Oh yeah.
So we could see a big, rise of the drive-in, sort of that community, that culture again.
Oh, that's
which
yeah.
I think could really be something to look into. It's a safe way to gather.
Oh yeah.
I guess would be my kind of take on it.
Oh yeah. Well, there are a few modern drive-in theaters that are out there. Not a lot of them for sure.
Yep.
And I know some of them, what they'll do as far as the sound aspect of it, they actually have like a low power FM broadcast, and so you can just tune your radio in to get the sound for the movie. So
well, back in the day when we had the Valley Drive-In, you could totally do that. A lot of people would bring a radio with them so they could sit outside of their cars, or even the neighbors around the drive-in theater could sit on their rooftops and pull out their radios and have the complete show right there. So yeah, that's a great idea. I love the idea of the return of the drive-in theater because I've never had the chance to take my son to one. There's not one around here. It's now an 84 Lumber, and I still get mad at that. So to be able to see that come back, I would love to see that come back. Yeah. And that would be a very welcome return to me. I think for a lot of people, actually, it would be a welcome return.
When I first saw Grease in the theaters, I saw it in a drive-in theater in Beckley.
Oh, that was me. I saw RoboCop, Predator, like a lot of big films I saw for the first time at the Valley Drive-In Theater. It's true.
I would have to say I think as far as a modern experience, I think the one disadvantage I think is modern cars. The seats are separate. You don't have those bench seats like you did in the 50s and the 60s, and that prevents a certain level of to be tactful, we'll say intimacy. So, yeah. Although, definitely antique car culture they would show up in full force for, a drive-in theater for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, Mandy, I think that would be awesome for us to see that again. And, but I mean, certainly, they're saying, May at the very earliest, before we'd even see any kind of a cessation of shelter in place that we're in now.
Oh yeah, my town has enacted a 9:00 curfew now.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Sure did.
So what do all 25 of you do at that time?
Apparently, there were a group of maybe teenagers or young adults running around at 3:00 in the morning and knocking on doors and then running away. That classic, I guess, prank, but has become even worse now since I suppose kids can't do anything else.
Yeah.
But yeah, and now we've actually had a case in our area.
Oh.
So the mayors in these small towns are really, they're cracking down on it and saying no more.
Well, I mean that certainly says something when a relatively rural area like where you live that they're seeing cases. I mean, of course, I live in Kanawha County, and we are we're inundated with it. I mean, we have easily 2 or 3 times more cases here than any other county in the state, which makes sense. But yeah, I mean, like I said, we've all pretty much stayed shelter in place at this point, and yeah, I mean, obviously the world is not going to be the same after this is, and again, there's also been talk that this is just round 1 of this, and that when the fall comes, we might see some of this happen again. I don't know at this point, but the honest truth is, I mean, obviously the world is not going to be the same afterwards. But again, hopefully, as far as AMC, it doesn't look good for them. But I know that there's a lot of stuff that's been put on hold, and hopefully, it will be, eventually available to us. But, it's like you said, Kevin, there's a lot of material that, we just didn't really have the time to catch up on because there was just too much of it, and this gives us a chance really to kind of step back and maybe discover some things that in a real sense, and I was talking to Mandy about this, in a podcast, is that there was so much content coming out that there was a lot of stuff that I just stopped watching because it's like, it wasn't enough for it to be good. It had to be fantastic because there was just way too much of it. And,
Sure.
I bailed out on so many shows just because it's like, well, it's good, but I pretty much, like Apple Plus, I bailed out of so many of those shows because not because they weren't good, but the time investment on them. You had to look at that. It's like I bailed on shows that I figure 5 or 10 years ago I would have been ecstatic about. But the thing is, there's just so much out there, you can't watch everything. So you have to kind of pick and choose.
Well, and that's at least that. I think from the standpoint of streaming services, again, there's at least that idea that there's really not a content desert as much as you think, because I guarantee there's some documentary or some sitcom or some movie that's out there that you have not seen before. And now, of course, with all being stuff at home, you've got time to catch up. So I look at it as saying, it's a unique time, and thank God that we have these streaming services, because they really have been, for a lot of people, an outlet, in their evening when they're having downtime or, whatever. So I'm very glad that we have them. But I do hope that, for those that are sitting on a backlog of material like Disney Plus, that they start getting that out there, because it's silly to be sitting on content that nobody else can show,
right,
when you could be showing it, and basically exposing new audiences, to these films. And so, like you look at the fact that with Disney, okay, they have 20th Century Fox. Well, they have the Alien franchise. Well, you can put it on Disney Plus. You can have a special channel that's just 20th Century Fox, and there's a bunch of people out there who have never.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, we get to a point where this gets to a point where we're going to have to. There's just so much material out there, that people haven't had a chance to watch yet, and so certainly we get to a point where it's we really definitely want to see it for sure, and having that opportunity is going to be really awesome. So.
I saw an article, I can't remember if it was Cracked or BuzzFeed, but it was pretty good. It was giving you suggestions of what you can watch instead of, because we don't get to see Fast and Furious yet, well, why not go and revisit the original job? And one of them talked about Mulan. It said, one of the live-action Mulan, well, don't forget that Mulan in China was like Cinderella. There are tons of live-action Mulan movies, if you don't mind subtitles.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's a really good point, Mandy, about that there, with all the stuff that's going out right now. Of course, with we're seeing trailers for new things as well. With Rick and Morty. And of course, I was thinking about Rick and Morty because you were talking about Mulan, and there's been, especially with the Rick and Morty fans, people are wondering, because we're getting live action Mulan, or if we're going to get the Szechuan sauce back from McDonald's. They should, for sure. But I've been watching I saw the new trailer for the new season of Rick and Morty, which is supposed to start this May. I think we talked about this before, Mandy, but you haven't watched any of Rick and Morty?
I haven't got the Rick and Morty, no.
Oh yeah, that is one of those shows. It's like I don't know if it, people would you recommend this show? And I'm like, yeah, kinda. I would recommend. I mean, I love this show, but man, is it dark as all get out. It's like you have to recommend it to the right person. Let me ask you, Kevin, have you ever seen any of Rick and Morty? Do you know much about that show? Have you seen it?
I've seen clips of it, but I've not actually watched it. I mean, I know enough about like Pickle Rick and stuff like that, but I don't know the actual show, other than just it's kind of loosely based off of the ideas of Doc and Marty from Back to the Future, but they go into way more crazier, darker.
Oh yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, in many cases, it can be really nihilistic, which and it's like you were talking about in BoJack Horseman, of how good the writing is, and it can get really heavy at sometimes. And this show is certainly that kind of show. I wouldn't say it's for everyone. Not everybody wants to watch a cartoon to feel the futility and pointlessness of life in general. But it's very, like I said, it's a very well written show. It's very clever, and there's like tons of Easter eggs and things to find in the show. I mean, it's like I said, it's a great show. It's one of those frustrating shows where if you getting into it, you watch a season and you love it and you realize, well, it's going to be 2.5 years before the next one. It takes them forever to get a season out. So it can be, like I said, it can be really frustrating, to be honest, waiting for seasons to start up. And, it's like they gave us, this last season, they gave us like 5 episodes and then went off the air, even though they had just signed this contract where they were going to be guaranteed seasons at this point, because, that one of the reasons why it would take them 2.5 years between seasons is they would sign a contract for one season. And of course, Adult Swim was like, well, let's see if people will stick with this, because they knew what kind of show they were putting out. And so people seemed interested. So they said, okay, let's do one more season and see how that goes. But people enjoyed it enough that it got to a point where they got this big contract, but they do 5 episodes of of the last, and they're like, well, this is a half episode. We'll do the other half here in a few months. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely stuff to be that's coming down the pike. Of course, a lot of stuff we've been looking forward to, like Bucky and the Winter Soldier has been put on hiatus, and so. A lot of the stuff that we were hoping to see this year, we're just not going to see. And
I mean, Columbia Pictures had to back up several films, including Ghostbusters, to 2021, and so that was obviously a film I was really excited for this summer. But I get it; there's a lot of money in these franchises and in these films. You've got to, you've got to fall back and punt. You can hopefully get a return on investment. I get it. I mean, it sucks, but I get it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And the thing about that too is that with the fact that this was one rumor. I don't know if this is going to turn out to be this way, but of course, Wonder Woman 1984 was being delayed, and there was talk that there was a possibility that Wonder Woman and Black Widow might come out in the same weekend. Which I don't know. Yeah, which that would be an interesting beatdown. And of course, we talked about this last week. I talked about this with Mandy last week, and told her, I say, well, in a situation like that, I'm just going to go see both of them. We'll just do a double feature.
Yeah, I'm going to see both of them. Yeah, so there's that. But it's definitely I'll be interested to see, I guess, how much the Hollywood model changes after this year, as far as their releasing of films and things, because this definitely was something nobody was prepared for. And you also have to look at the fact that Hollywood in these past couple of years has truly relied on the international market, especially in China. So, they've really, I'm sure it'll be very interesting to see how this plays out, because that Chinese market has been responsible for certain franchises getting sequels that wouldn't normally happen.
Right.
And if the market has been knocked out because of this virus as well, it's just going to be really interesting to see how Hollywood recovers from this, if Hollywood recovers from it, and, what that looks like.
Well, the thing about it is studios always work off of a margin. They're, every movie that comes out, is based off of, how much money were they able to make on the last few movies. And, the thing about it is they don't, in a real sense, 1 or 2 bad movies can knock a movie studio, for a loop, in a real way, and can really hurt them. But, the thing is, nobody's making money right now. I don't know, Kevin, if you've been curious enough to do this, but I've jumped up on Box Office Mojo because I was curious, I wondered what, if they were going to still report box offices. And yeah, they're still reporting box offices, $1,200 this weekend,
Yeah.
So, and of course, the thing about it too is that, movies that had just come out, like Onward, I mean, there's no telling how successful they would have been, but obviously, only being able to be out for a week or two doesn't help at all. So,
no, it doesn't.
and it's just funny how this whole pandemic has changed things gaming wise. I know you play or used to play Magic the Gathering. They've got a new series of cards coming out, and they're basically it's a world full of kaiju, and so all the monsters are massively huge. And they did they're doing a cross marketing with Toho Studios. They're bringing Godzilla into Magic the Gathering. So there's a Godzilla card and a mecha, and Mothra and Mega Godzilla, Space Godzilla. But here's the thing: they're having to reprint the Space Godzilla card because his and this is straight out of the movies. His attack is called the Space Corona, and so they're going to change. Yeah, so they're changing the name of that. So it's like the first it was too late for them to change the names of the cards. But the second printing, they're gonna completely change that. But if you wanted to play, if you ever thought, my Magic deck just doesn't have enough Godzilla in it, well, don't worry, that's about to change. So
you better have people. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, there you go. There is. I know there's Baby Godzilla is one of the cards in there for sure. King Ghidorah is one of the cards in there. I'm trying to remember. There were two cards. There are two cards, and I can't remember what they are, but they are Japanese only cards. So that was they were able to do a couple of Japanese only Magic cards for this set.
Oh.
So learn to read Japanese if you want to play those two cards. But I thought that was, I saw that and I thought that's a great idea. But then they were like, well, this one card, its attack is, the Space Corona, and I'm like, oh, I see why you have to change that. But there was some interesting. Oh yeah,
Rapunzel, her kingdom is Corona, the kingdom of Corona.
Yeah,
that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, so there's a lot of that stuff now. One of the things I found interesting, it was like the Godzilla card when he comes into you put him into play, all of your creatures do damage based off of their toughness is based off of their power. If you got like a 10-1 creature, it can take 10 points of damage because their toughness is now the number for their power. So and that's all the creatures you have in play. So and Mothra, and the thing about Mothra is while Mothra is in play, any creature that dies on your side comes back into play with flying. So
nice.
Yeah. So yeah, big powers for these big kaiju. So I mean, there's a lot of fun there for sure. But yeah, I mean, as of right now, I mean, we're pretty much if it wasn't for streaming, and all that, I mean, things would definitely be boring at this point. But there's a lot of interesting stuff out there that has nothing to do with guys and tigers and murder. Although if you stay on the internet, it seems like that's all that's going on right now. But yeah, I just saw there were two pieces there were two movies that are out now. One movie and a documentary that I've been hearing about, but I've never had a chance to see. One is the documentary on the Church of Satan, the new Church of Satan. It's called Hail Satan. Where they're trying to get.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's so that's out, and Glenn Danzig's horror anthology is now out on Hulu, Verotica, and that's one of those. I think I did see that Red Letter Media just put out a review on it.
I have not watched their half in the bag on it yet, but they did have one. Yes, it's like an hour long too.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing about it is people were saying, this is this generation's The Room. So you can just imagine, just how bad this thing is. And I did watch some of the Red Letter Media thing, and they bring up, that comment, and there's like, no, it's not that good. I'm like, oh, this is going to be a treat. So yeah, there's definitely stuff to catch up on and online. So there's certainly stuff that we'll be able to talk about over the weeks of our self-imposed imprisonment at this point. But
and I hope that this will kind of encourage people to go back and visit things that they've not had a chance to watch. I know, like in your case, Brian, I know you've never really watched BoJack Horseman.
yeah,
And I hope that this now gives you that chance to do so, because I think it's one of the finest sitcoms that I've about ever watched, and one of the finest shows when it comes to the writing and the performances that you'll find anywhere, whether it's animated or live action, whether it's streaming or network. That show, it really is very transcendent how great it is. I mean, it's genuinely funny. It really is. And Mandy can back me up on this. There are moments in that show that are very heartfelt, very heartbreaking, but man, it is also responsible for some humongous laughs, sight gags, background jokes. I tell people, if you watch it, read every banner that you ever see hanging up in a room in any party or any award show in that show. Read the banners. There's an ongoing joke on every single banner, and it's brilliant. That show it's better than we deserve.
Well, it's definitely on my to-do list for sure. I am doing a lot of work from home, and which has been keeping me busier than if I were actually going into the office. I was telling that to Mandy before the show today. But yeah, BoJack Horseman is definitely one of those shows that I want to catch up on. I know usually at the end of the near the end of the podcast we talked some Walking Dead, but I know, Mandy, you haven't quite caught up with everything yet, and at this point we're sort of we're sort of on a holding pattern because we haven't gotten that last episode yet. So I figure there's really no point at this to talk about anything with the show until we get that final episode anyway. So I figure for right now,
I'll ask this suggestion and start with Mandy. What is something that, now that we have time to watch stuff, what's something that you would recommend people to watch, be it a movie or a series? What would you recommend that your listeners watch if they've not seen it yet? Mandy, what would you say?
There is a short-lived show. It only lasted 3 seasons, but it's called Zoo, and it's like James Patterson. It's sort of like in a world where the animals have turned against us. So ZOO, and it's 3 seasons, and it's really good. It's a little on the hokey side, but I like that. Yeah, I like that kind of stuff. But it's really interesting, the pseudoscience behind it, and the kind of apocalyptic world is, kind of in a way of it's relatable at the moment. What are we going to do, sort of thing, and I enjoy it. Zoo.
oh yeah. I would say there's a documentary on Shudder that if you have the Shudder service, you should definitely check out, especially if you're a horror fan. And it's called Horror Noir. And basically, it is a documentary on the African-American view of horror and their depictions, and, of course, writers and creators. There's an entire history that has been lost, basically. Because a lot of us, who love horror, there's stuff that, for one reason or another, we haven't been exposed to, and a lot of great stuff out there. It's a very eye-opening documentary, and there's a lot of stuff that, I didn't know, and great movies, horror movies that I didn't get a chance to see. Because of course it didn't really fall into my radar because, in horror, there's certain things that get promoted and certain things that not quite as much. And Shudder is really cool that, number one, that Shudder was able to, do this documentary. And I mean, you get to hear a lot of, Jordan Peele, and just the things that, the interviews they did with him for this was great. But Tananariss Due is in this documentary as well. And she's got a great, great comments to make about, the history of horror and, African Americans in horror. But not only was it cool that Shudder could put out that documentary, but they also have a curated collection of some of these movies that you can go back and watch now. So it's So, you know, you can watch the documentary and then you can go into their archives and actually go and watch some of these films. And some of them are, I mean, you know, a lot of these films are like really brilliant, you know. And, you know, the thing about it is, you know, the Black experience in America, you know, it's just rife with horror. And to be able to use horror tropes to express a lot of that stuff it's fascinating. It's great. It's something to watch for sure. So yeah, that would be my recommendation if I had to make one. So what about you, Kevin? What are you checking out right now that you would recommend to people?
Well, like I said, I just started watching the first season of Westworld on HBO, and just last night watched the very first episode of Watchmen on HBO. So that's pretty interesting stuff. I will say, if you've not watched BoJack Horseman, I can't recommend that show highly enough. I genuinely cannot. And I will say too, if you are stuck at home with the kids, the Back to the Future trilogy is on Netflix. And if your kids have not had a chance to watch that, this is a great opportunity because, you know, what else do you have to do?
Right.
And why not show them one of the greatest film trilogies of all time? And you know, just again, you know, Back to the Future, one of the most perfect movies I've ever watched. It's a top 10 movie for me. So that's out there as well. If you're in the mood for a documentary, man, of course, if you've not watched Tiger King, my God in heaven, it's on a whole other existence. It's amazing. And I've never seen a show where each episode just one-ups the WTF factor like that show. It's very fascinating. So yeah, there's a lot of good content out there. This is a great time to take a chance on something. If you've not watched it, now's a great time to do it. There are also movies you can find on streaming, that you can purchase and stuff. My two favorite films of last year, I'm fortunate that I own them on Blu-ray, but if you've not seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and Ford versus Ferrari, I can't recommend two films higher to you than those two. They're outstanding films, and if you've not seen them, find them on a pay streaming service. It would be worth your time. That's a lot of good movie content. Each movie is like almost 3 hours long, but they don't feel it. And boy, a lot of great stuff happening. Just great performances. You know, Academy Awards went out to both of those films, deservedly so. So if you've not seen those, I could not recommend two movies higher enough.
Oh yeah, well that definitely good recommendations for that. And it's like you say, there's a lot of stuff out there, and there's really not a better time to dip in and see some really good stuff. So for sure.
Absolutely.
Yep. And so with that said, we come to the end of episode 106 of the Geek Watch podcast. Thank you for listening, and tune in next week for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie and Kevin Pauley, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.